Good morning to everybody. Indeed, I'm Dmitry Velikovsky, and I'd like to say a couple of words about the major project we did together with the consortium, international consortium of investigative journalists in the new Novaya Gazeta, that is on work on the Panama papers, and that was something really big. It was big both for the journalist community, and I hope globally, economically, it also matters a great deal. Hence, why is this so important and an exclusive project in its own way? Because leaks like that have never happened before. Not only leaks that big, but had to do with cases and documents and offshores. This 2.6 terabyte, this huge bulk of information and data, that means 12 million documents. And on top, we've never before has seen such massive cross-border cooperation between journalists, and this is what makes it special. We say that whatever it is, journalism of the future, of the 21st century, because 400 journalists across the world joined together, found a way to come together and work like one big team, like one big online publishing house, although that meant 100 classical editorial houses, editorial boards that all worked within their own country domestically, but they sort of joined online to become something. I've also worked with WikiLeaks, that has very major projects, big like cable gates, but each was for oneself. But for others, it was in a certain way a surprise. Whereas in this particular case, what mattered for me most, and also the most important emotional and professional things, was how people from different countries may work at the same time, working for the same goal. In brief, how it all worked. In 2015, first the German colleagues, the Deutsche Zeitung, they approached somebody under the classical pseudonym, the people who don't want to give their name, John Doe. And he said that he has a database of Fonseca. Well, first they did not really believe him, but he sent them several documents to prove the seriousness of his intentions, and of course they were quite, inciting the curiosity of investigative journalists, and thus they received a huge bulk of information. After that, once they have seen how much is there, they got, really, really lost, and they realized they would never process it. Even in terms of time and in terms of they did not one single editorial house could have sufficient number of resources to do it. And besides, they realized that their skills and competence about what was going on in, say, Argentina or even Russia is certainly way below what local journalists might do about this. They quite sensibly decided that they should seek ways to make this story international instead of keeping it, and wish to thank them for it, not to keep it under the pillow, not to do exclusive stories at Süddeutsche Zeitung, the 3.5 stories to become world famous. No, that would have been a classical step. Like, we got it, we will glorify ourselves, and that's it. There is no doubt that they would have received a Pulitzer, and like 3 only of them. Otherwise, Pulitzer was awarded to this huge editorial house, 400 people, and now even got 1/400th share of Pulitzer. And I would like to thank the Germans for sharing that information with us. They went to this consortium of international investigative journalists who used to deal with these leaks, but certainly were much smaller scale. And again, the colleagues did a great job there. And they did a special search engine, mini Google, with filters to they actually coined this very convenient thing, which, for example, WikiLeaks actually used search for databases, but this sort of level of search is something I haven't seen before. And they've done a great job here, and I realized that the huge documents have to be recognized, have become machine readable, and have to be structured along such lines that it would be easy to browse them. That was one platform, one level they could use. And the second thing is that they did, all the journalists who worked on that project could just hit some web address and they would have a virtual editorial house there. We all stayed communicated within that. By default, we thought if we should find another story, we would mention it, describe it, just in case if somebody from another country would think that this is important. Because usually they would come up with their own story. So in fact, that was a common database. And that is really very good, that there were no stories that I would not have heard of. Nobody seemed to be hiding anything. And it was also very convenient, also from the sense of camaraderie, and also it helped because when you work with cross-border information, the data that has to do with a huge number of countries and jurisdictions, then few people may really track the whole chain, because these offshores are branching. One is in Luxembourg, the other goes to Cook's Islands, and so on and so forth. And its beneficiary may be based in Russia, where the presence of colleagues in all the countries, basically, of the world helped greatly. And this is why actually investigative journalists work much faster and better than law enforcement, although law enforcement have the guns and rank and financially have huge powers and authority. But the thing is that some kind of member of staff from Rosfinmonitoring, original prosecutor or Moscow prosecutor, in order to request data for, say, a Czech company, he or she requires to do a huge number of actions. He has to sign, say, 5 papers, get an endorsement from 5, then translate it to Czech, send it to Czech's prosecutor's office, and they may come back to him in 6 months' time. This is quite a bothersome project, and it also may be conditioned political factors, if they treat Russia as a partner or not. And those people who really work very hard, the prosecutor's office, even they would need so much time to get the documents for some company that, attention, are available in open sources. In Czech Republic, there are several open companies. You can hit several web buttons and get for free all the information about these companies. Clearly, it would take me 15 minutes, whereas Czechs would take only 3 minutes. And the prosecutor will take 1 year, because he can't just at his own initiative just undertake these actions. And moreover, things are even further if it is, for example, for fee registry, and in Cyprus, €10. I don't know who would want to pay €10 for their own journalism, for his own investigation, but it's so much simpler for us, journalists. I'm not speaking when it is written in Swahili.
Ни прокурор, ничего не можем, но я могу написать человеку.
But I can write to somebody who knows Swahili, and he will find it all. We had many cases when guys would ask me something about Russia, saying, look, there are a number of figures, what can you find about them? Certainly with my Cyrillic search, I go to Ros Registry, Rosreestr, go to the databases and draft a dossier for them. That certainly brings a new note into the investigation. So another major thing about this project, and this is most important, it continues, because we all met each other, and now some story that has nothing to do with this archive. We can write to these colleagues whom we met personally. Some people we've been online. And the outcome, I don't want to dwell in great detail upon it. In Russian, this is we created a website that is known as krug.novagazeta.ru, where we put our findings on Russia. We were 4 of us in a team that worked over Russian sources and Russian stories, and we had both governors and deputies, as well as like a cherry on top of the cake, Putin's childhood friend, cello player Roldugin, through his offshore where billions of dollars go through. Well, Roldugin is a very outstanding story. If you haven't read about it, read about it. This really provoked public interest, and this is where certainly there were few of us, and it makes a world of difference how this all works in the Soviet world and other countries. I know that our colleagues from Austria, for example, were very concerned because he found only a couple of half stories. He was short of materials, whereas we had such a huge bulk of stories. They were small. We found people who had too much material, and others were very. It's sad, on the other hand, but professionally, that gave us a lot of drive, huge drive. And of course, certainly, probably, I should speak about the response that could be predictable. Because, yes, in other countries of the world, we've seen thousands and thousands of articles that were published. We tried to make a count. As of December 2016, that is 6 months after the first publication, overall there have been 6,000 publications across the world. And let alone if there was just small note in a minor newspaper in a small village or town. And quite large shifts. I wouldn't call them tectonic, but quite a lot has happened across the world. It has to do with some personalia, and that was Icelandic Prime Minister that had to resign. Now Pakistani Prime Minister, now he is under investigation because 3 of his sons are the ones who are beneficiaries of some muddy offshores. Well, again, there have been a lot of legislative amendments across the world, but in very many dozens of countries that are special commissions that now are looking at some laws that would be following from this Panama leak that regulate and improve this sphere, seeking to make this more transparent, this money laundering, to make it more transparent in terms of getting to understand how this money laundering works. But nothing much happened with us. In a sense that it is predictable, they said it was a leak that was meant to go against Vladimir Putin personally. Peskov, Putin's press secretary, would say something like that, which is very funny given that his wife had an offshore which is totally out of the question, as the law says. And the governors from Pskov, Governor Turchak from Pskov, and Governor Dubrovsky from Chelyabinsk, they still take their own seats. Well, cello player Roldugin, there was a film on TV channel Russia, like he spent all these billions on Stradivari, which is pretty funny given that Guarneri and Stradivari have never made that many violins to really be worth 2 billion. Only 1 out of 4 offshores are worth 2 billion. On others, there's still not sufficient data. This is like pretty sad, I would say. And what is optimistic about this? Good progress is that no friends of Putin's would stop him, in the sense that you do understand that a couple of decades ago, or even before, leaks like that visibly could not happen. Why? Well, because this huge bulk of data, you need several lorries to carry that on paper. and get it. It should be a huge army operation, but you needed just to make so much effort that it would be totally impossible. Nowadays, hooray, hooray, this can be done. This is easy, and the same applies to cooperation of journalists. And okay, that leak did not really mean much in Russia, I mean technically, but the leaks will continue, leaks will go on, and of course the question is about the motivation of journalists, and that is a long story, because ideally journalists work hoping that where they discover something unjust, unfair, they work in hopes that the world would change. But as we see, this is not necessarily the case. Even in very simple cases, people continue to occupy their posts, although the law explicitly says that when a person has a account abroad, or their family members, they were supposed to resign. Well, but they have no time for that, probably too busy. And I would like to read, and I want to end this. My wife wrote a PhD, and she discovered an excellent quote from Schlesinger, which was very close to me. For me, it describes world perception as well as why I continue to do it. Why is it that it still continues to be great, despite the absence of immediate result that I would probably like to see? Well, this is the quote. I'll try to translate it into Russian. I apologize if it would sound a bit not very nice. It would not make very good reading in Russian. Well, Schlesinger wrote, the duty of history is to give such a complete and exact reconstruction of the past to which extent it is possible, as well as the duty of a sensible, reasonable society to give its members the most precise out of all reconstruction of the purposes and as well as what the activities or whatever their leaders do. Well, so this appeal for a reasonable, sensible society is something that I find very close. I find when I open the news reels in the morning, and half of them cannot be called reasonable. It's just some nightmare. It's like theatre of absurdities. But I don't want to live in this world of absurdity. That's why I would live as if I still live in a reasonable, sensible society. And this is my objective to write. Yes, it turns out I more work like in the archives, like a chronicle writer, but those who change this Russia's reality. But most importantly, I still feel I belong to the reasonable and sensible society.